Well, we made it past the trade deadline, everybody. I think we all need a little bit of a breather, but I'm not going to give you one because there's work to be done. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Besbris, your host, and today we are doing a top 10 ads from Yahoo Fantasy that I thought dovetailed nicely with trade deadline winners. Not every single one of them, but a lot of them fall right into that category. And so it's an opportunity for us to really just laser focus in on the names that you guys are most interested in today. Before we do that, I want to tell you guys a couple of quick things. Number one, this show is brought to you by Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. This, by the way, we are 2 days away from Super Bowl Sunday, the biggest betting weekend of the entire damn year. So, more updated odds, more props for Super Bowl Sunday. BetOnline has hundreds of them available to you right now. You got MVP odds if you want to get down on that. In-game live betting exclusive opportunities, all at BetOnline, making that site your ultimate game day companion, whether you're a first-timer or a seasoned fan. Visit BetOnline today. Make the action count a little bit more on game day. BetOnline, the game starts here. Thanks to everybody that tuned in to our trade deadline live show and recap episode yesterday. All together, that's totaled now more than 12,000 on YouTube, more than 12,000 also over on social media. That's crazy. That's crazy. So hugs and kisses to you all. Please take a minute here at the front end to hit that like button on the video. Very important. Subscribe. Do it immediately. Post haste. Subscriptions. That's how we grow this snowball, this bad boy. And follow on Twitter at Dan Besbris, DanBesbris, Blue Sky Old Man Squad. Here's the list. I'm just going to put the Yahoo board up on the screen in front of you guys. I think that's the easiest way right now, although I'm realizing it's a little small. So let's zoom in a tiny bit more. Here's the list, top 10 ads, and you can see some of the teams that are in one of my leagues with me. This is by volume. These are the players that were added the most on Yahoo today. Number 1 is Kyshawn George. Number 2 is Moussa Diabate. Number 3 is Bub Carrington. Number 4 is Isaiah Collier. Number 5 is Nick Smith Jr. Number 6 is Dalton Knecht. Number 7, Keon Johnson. Number 8, Bilal Coulibaly. Number 9, Jusuf Nurkic. And number 10, Royce O'Neale. We're going to go through them one by one. We'll start with Kyshawn George and just let you know how I'm feeling about these players as potential ads, whether basically I would do it with you guys or with Yahoo or however you want to talk about it, my reasoning on why I am or am not doing it. So let's talk about Kyshawn George. Obviously, the big thing here, number 1, is that they play today. So a lot of the ads you'll notice on Yahoo in general are on days where teams are playing. So Washington has a game today. They're also into a back-to-back. Let's just wipe that out for a minute, and let's look at the other stuff for Kyshawn. In game 1, after the removal of Jonas Valanciunas and actually, I think that game was before the JV trade. That was before the JV trade. The removal of Kyle Kuzma, Kyshawn played 30 minutes, went 6 out of 8 shooting, 5 for 7 from downtown. He had 17, 7, and 3 with a steal and a block. All that sounds great. The problem, as I see it, is that he still only took 8 shots. And so my inclination is not to necessarily be Captain Buzzkill over here, even though that is often what I do, but instead to look back at the stretch of games in November where Kyshawn was getting to do a little bit more. It was basically from like October 30th, I think that was right around when Kuz went down, to like November 13th, and other guys started coming back and kind of squeezed him out a little bit. And he had some good ones in there. He had 11 points with 3 steals and 4 assists. This one not as good, but 6 points, 8 boards. He had a 26-4 game with 6 3-pointers. He took 17 threes in that game. It's a little crazy. 17, 6, and 3 with a steal, block, and 3 3-pointers. 15, 7, and 1 with a steal, 2 steals, a block, and 4 3-pointers. Then if you go up here to his 32-minute game, 12, 3, and 5 with 2 steals and 2 threes. He has, by all accounts, a pretty damn well-rounded fantasy game. But how certain can we be that he will actually get up around 10 shots per ball game and it's not going to be 8? Because we've seen the Kyshawn George taking 7 or 8 shots deal, and it's not really good enough. You can see this game here against the Lakers. That was a blowout. He got to log some extra minutes late. There was this other one against the Phoenix Suns. These were all kind of towards the end of January, where he played 30 minutes, and he took 7 shots in one of them, and he took 5 in the other. Now, admittedly, Kuzma was floating around for these games, so that's a lot of usage getting dropped back into the bucket. But he had 8 points, 2 boards, 5 assists in one. He had 5 points, 3 steals in the other. Worse than that. 5 points, 1 block in the other. He did have 6 rebounds in that game. So there has to be more than just 30 minutes. Do I think there will be? Yeah, I mean, it feels like 8 shots is probably the low water mark for him now with Kuzma gone. But we also have to wonder, are Marcus Smart and Chris Middleton actually going to log any minutes for this team? It doesn't sound like they're being bought out. So there's that. And with Middleton, the reason is quite clear. He has a player option for $34 million next season. So you're not going to buy that out. That's too expensive when you can hold and trade him next year and get more assets for it. So there's sort of no reason for them to do so. And so then the thought becomes, if these guys play at all, Middleton and Marcus Smart, and don't get me wrong, I don't think they're playing every game. There's going to be a lot of rest days in there. Same story for Malcolm Brogdon. But there will be games where they play, probably against the better opponents, to like try to keep the game at least within sniffing distance. And they can rest them against terrible opponents so that the Wizards sort of win the tank battle on those days. We've seen that a lot with Utah so far this year, Brooklyn as well. And now probably you throw Washington in that mix because they've got a handful of veterans. Better, frankly. The funny thing is, the Wizards probably got better at this trade deadline by replacing JV and Kuzma with Middleton and Smart. That's a better team. They're still generally horrendous, although they've won 3 games in a row somehow. I mean, 2 of them were against fellow tankmeisters, Charlotte and Brooklyn, but they did beat Minnesota in there as well. So what am I doing here with Kyshawn George? Well, until I know what the Wizards' plan is for Middleton and Smart, it's kind of impossible to make a final call. I would say Kyshawn is an ad. It's a yay, a thumbs up, but like a 1 priority out of 3. So he's better than a do-nothing, but it's not the top priority guy. Next name on the ads board is Moussa Diabate. Who briefly became the only center in Charlotte and then was quickly removed from that when the Hornets acquired Jusuf Nurkic and picks from the Phoenix Suns. And I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not certain how Diabate and Nurkic split their minutes. And I don't think we're going to get any answer on that today because I would highly doubt that Nurk is in town and ready to make his debut for the Hornets immediately. Are they playing tonight? Probably should look that up. They are. They're hosting the Spurs, and then they play again on Sunday. I would assume that we see Nurk for the first time on Sunday. So at least for today, Diabate is very much an all systems go dude because they're basically going to have no choice but to play him, and you can see it on the screen, 30-plus minutes in this one. And you can go back to previous games this year. There was a stretch of 5 games where Mark Williams and Nick Richards were both out at the end of November, and Diabate played 31, 32, 33, and then 37 minutes in those 5 games. And he had a, let's call it, interesting fantasy game. Because in those 5 games, he scored 1, 0, 2, 0, and 6 points. That's right, guys. He scored 9 points over 5 games, playing in about 160 minutes. 9 points. But it wasn't without upside. You know, he had 16 rebounds, 11, 8, 11, and 11 in those 5 games. He had almost as many assists as he had points. He had 6 assists over those 5 games. And then most importantly, just to make sure that I'm getting this right, which column is which. He had steals and blocks. These are steals and blocks right here. So steals was 3-2-2-1-0. Blocks was 0-1-4-0-1. 6 blocks, 8 steals over those 5 games. That's what you're buying into if you're picking up Moussa Diabate. You're definitely not buying into any kind of points being scored. So at least for one ball game, you can pretty much guarantee that Diabate is going to get you double-digit rebounds in their game tonight. He's going to be dealing with Wemby, so I have no idea what the foul situation is going to be like, what the scoring situation is going to be like. Steals or blocks might be hard to come by. Well, steals, you could probably get some against Wemby. He's a better steals guy than he is a blocks center, Diabate. I'm seeing a lot of people talking on the internet about how Charlotte thinks that he's like the future of their center position. I can pretty much guarantee you that they do not. He's a second-round pick by the Clippers like 2.5 years ago. He's not like a rookie or something. He's a center. He's a guy they have. Nurkic is also not the long-term fix at center for the Hornets, which makes me think, well, if nobody is the priority for this team, then they could play anyone. And so for Charlotte's sake, you kind of have to think through, like, what are the upsides and downsides to each of these dudes? For Nurkic, you kind of have to go through and look at the contractual side of it. Phoenix ended up with that mess of a contract that was originally signed by Portland, right? And if I'm not mistaken, Nurk has another $19 million due next year. Meaning, Charlotte has every reason to make Nurkic look as good as humanly possible. Because they're not going to be able to do anything with him this year. They're not going to buy him out because they're not going to pay for next season's big fat salary. When, as annoying as Nurk is, and at times as terrible as he is, at a $19 million rate next year, he's going to get them something, like a second rounder, probably. Some team's going to want a backup center. They're going to be willing to take a shot on him. And at that point, they could buy him out, but they should at least see what they can get. So there's I'm thinking of like the Thunder when they were in the deepest throes of their rebuild, just rehabbing values. They were doing it left and right. Al Horford, I think, was maybe one of the prime candidates. Chris Paul, frankly, was kind of one of the candidates there. They were just rehabbing value. And that's what the Hornets should, logically, be doing with Nurk as well. Rehab his value. Let him play some number of minutes. Maybe don't let him play every day. Give him, you could go every other day, something like that if you really want to. But when he's out there, let him cook. Let him show teams that he can not be a headache, that he can still ball. So I'm not super high on Diabate, if only because I think he's going to be splitting minutes with Nurk a lot of the time. Maybe not all of the time, but at least some. But for games cap spots where you can play him on the days Nurk sits and maybe bench on the days that they're splitting the minutes, that might be the answer there, which, again, makes him a little bit tougher on the head-to-head side unless you're very much punting points. But that's my take on Diabate. Bub Carrington is the next name on the list, and he's coming off a huge ball game his last time out. 16 points, 10 assists, 4 rebounds. But, guys, listen, I know Kuz is gone, and everything gets better when Kuz is gone. But, again, Marcus Smart is going to be a problem when he plays. Middleton's going to be a problem when he plays. And we've seen enough of Bub so far this year to know that his fantasy game just isn't there yet. He's shooting 39% from the field. Yes, I mean, look, here's the thing. He's playing 29 minutes a game this year. It's not like he's getting low minutes, and he's averaging 8.5 points and 4 assists. Even if you ratchet up the usage and get him into double digits in scoring and like an extra assist, 11 points and 5 assists on bad percentages with not a ton of defensive stats is not good enough in 9-cat. So I am not in on Bub Carrington yet. If, however, I will leave this open-ended, if Jordan Poole gets shut down and then Marcus Smart and Middleton don't play, I maintain the right to change my answer. Let's go to Isaiah Collier, the next name on the list, who I just screwed up my screen, and I removed I removed Isaiah Collier instead of just replacing. There we go. Isaiah's back. Welcome back, Mr. Collier. He's a guy that definitely belongs on rosters. He was and remains a little bit of a punt turnovers guy, although his last couple of ball games, he's been able to actually keep the turnovers low, but they're going to be high. His scoring, also, he had a big jump in their win over Golden State. That's not a thing that's going to stick. There are obvious fantasy problems with Collier. He's a terrible three-point shooter. He's not a good foul shooter. So a lot of folks, and like even some of the best, are going to overlook the fact that from a straight 9-cat standpoint, it's going to be damn near impossible for him to get inside the top 100. But if you're punting threes, he sees a big jump. If you're punting turnovers, he sees a big jump. There's two ways that you can get Isaiah Collier inside the top 100. So he's like the prototypical head-to-head versus roto discussion guy right now. Because over his last 7 or 8 ball games, he's averaging like 12 points and 8 to 9 assists. He's actually shot the ball well over that stretch, too. He hasn't even been a punt percentages guy, but 0.4 threes, only 3.7 rebounds, over 3 turnovers a game. So in 9-cat, he's at like number 140. In 8-cat, he's like number 85. So for Collier, to me, he's a punt turnovers play. Again, I know he has 21 assists and only 3 turnovers in his last 2 ball games. That's basically balancing out the stretch where he had 22 turnovers over 5 games. That wasn't, actually 26 turnovers over 6 games. Like 4.5 was probably not going to stick, but also 2 probably isn't going to stick. He's going to land somewhere in between, probably in the 3s. And for most guys, if you were like, oh, you're going to get me, 8.5 assists a ball game on 3 turnovers, it'd be a no-brainer. The problem with Collier is that his steals are fine, but not great. His scoring isn't fine, actually sub-average for the most part here. Although Colin Sexton being out, maybe that ends up helping him a little bit there. And perhaps most importantly, his percentages are probably not going to be great. His threes are going to be devastatingly low. So it's all about fit. He's an ad in a lot of formats. But I'll be honest with you guys, I don't think I put him on a single, maybe I put him on one of my roto teams. And I think it was one where I have this massive lead in field goal percent where that part doesn't really bother me all that much if it ends up being low. Or maybe it's a roto team where I'm like second to the bottom in turnovers anyway. So the downside was minimized. Next name on the list is Nick Smith Jr., who's had a lot to do over the last couple of ball games, but it sounds like LaMelo Ball is close to coming back. Thank goodness for that. By the way, stay tuned to the news today because we might actually get LaMelo back for this ball game. Josh Green actually just got downgraded to doubtful, so if LaMelo doesn't play, then Nick Smith Jr. is a perfectly reasonable option. If he does, I'm not a big Nick Smith Jr. guy, mostly because he's a shooting guard. He's an undersized shooting guard at that, but he's not a good passer. I think his assist to turnover ratio this year is like 1.5 to 1, and it's on super low numbers. And lately, they've been almost a dead heat. Yeah, that one game I was against the Lakers where he had 6 assists and only 1 turnover. Since then, he has a grand total of 9 assists and I think 8 turnovers. So, basically what that's telling you is he needs to be so good in the things he's pretty good at to counterweight the things he's not, that his path to value becomes damn near impossible. And you can see it lately. He's been really good his last 3 ball games. 19, 24, 23 points. He's scoring a lot. He has 13 threes over that stretch. He's shooting 58% over that stretch. And he still isn't really a fantasy asset. And that's with a lot of guys out for this team. That's with a lot of guys out. Now, admittedly, the Hornets, like, I don't know that anybody's, like, straight coming for his minutes, but I've got to think that Dalton Knecht, not Cam Reddish, and the return of LaMelo Ball is kind of enough to knock him down from 15, 16 shots back down to like 12. And to me, that's not even close to enough. So I am out on Nick Smith Jr. The next name on the list is the aforementioned Dalton Knecht, who, by the way, I'm in on. And it took me a minute on Dalton because his fantasy game is not that great. With the Lakers, he played about 21 minutes a game, 9 points, 3 boards, no defensive stats, 1.5 3-pointers. He's a very good 3-point shooter. He gets hot, which is hot. Dalton Knecht is a really fun thing to watch. And look, I'll pull up the game log for him on the screen for those watching on YouTube, because you can go back to that. Man, that was some kind of ball game. Or I'm going to try to pull up the game log. There we go. There was that game back in, there it is. It was against Utah where he hit 9 3-pointers and had 37 points. That was crazy. Thing is, when he gets 12 shots or more, you can start him in fantasy. Because and I know you're like, Dan, this is like the same stat set as Nick Smith Jr. Nay, I beg to differ. When Dalton Knecht gets up into that 28, 29, 30-minute range, which is, by the way, more than enough for him to jack up 11 shots. He's not bashful when he's out there, even on a team with LeBron James and Anthony Davis and like superstars that you should probably kind of, here you go, here's the ball. Dalton's still firing him up. There are very few instances this year where he played 28-ish minutes and didn't get double-digit shots up. I mean, you can probably count it on less than one hand. There's one. Denver, November 23rd. He played 28 minutes, only took 7 shots. I think every other game where he got to 28 minutes, he took 10 shots or more. Yep, confirmed. I didn't look at that before I went on air, but now that we're talking about it, it feels like we should probably do it. The reason that I have more faith in Dalton Knecht than I do in Nick Smith Jr. is because of 2 things. Number one, I think again, playing alongside LaMelo Ball is actually going to be fine for him. The rate of taking shots for those guys is going to be somewhat similar, but for Knecht, more of those shots are likely to be 3-pointers. And this is the most important part. Since neither of those guys really does much defensively, you're looking at Dalton Knecht's rebounding. Believe it or not, that's the thing that may separate these two guys. So either way, you're talking about a player that's probably going to need to score and hit a bunch of 3-pointers, but Knecht has the ability to go get a board. And I don't think that Nick Smith Jr. really does. Maybe I'm being a butthead about the whole thing. It's quite possible. But as you can see, Knecht is at 3 boards a game in low minutes. If you extrapolate that to, 30 minutes a game on a team that has no real big options, he could get up to around 5 rebounds. Meanwhile, Nick Smith is at 2 rebounds a game in about the same number of minutes. And as you crank his up, you can see, like, best case scenario, he gets to 5. Most of the time, he's going to be 2, 3, or 4. So somehow, believe it or not, that's kind of the difference between the two guys. So I would lean towards the dude who has a chance to get a few rebounds and away from the dude who kind of doesn't. Now, if Nick Smith Jr. starts passing better, that would be the way that this could sort of pivot back the other way. I just think that the Hornets... And I've talked about this on a different podcast already. There was that report from Ramona Shelburne that the Hornets kind of came to the Lakers and said, hey, we hear you guys need a center. Like, we want Dalton Knecht and picks. They actually want this dude. So I think he's going to get a good shot. Keon Johnson is the next name on the list. He's had a couple good ones in a row, and his minutes have generally been on the high side. But I'll admit, I just have no idea when it's going to be a decent day. I can't figure it out. This might be one of those, like, close your eyes and just go for it ones. But Cam Johnson came back. D'Angelo Russell's upright. There's a chance that, Cam Thomas might be back after the All-Star break. Noah Clowney should be back after the All-Star break. Something like that. So I'll be honest, guys. This is one that the Nets as a team kind of confound me. But Keon Johnson's doing a lot of stuff. And so, I can't really overlook the fact that he's, like, pretty consistently over the last 2 weeks doing things. And so I think you kind of have to add him. at least until Cam Thomas comes back. Maybe we call Keon Johnson an injury ad for Cam Thomas, because I don't know how he and D'Lo and Cam Johnson would all coexist after that fact. But right now, like last 2 weeks, he's taking 15 shots a game. His field goal percent is terrible, but he's scoring, hitting threes, getting some assists, good steals numbers, even has half a block over that stretch. We're trying to find all these new names to throw into the mix, but maybe it was Keon Johnson all along. Understand it or don't understand it, Dan. Keon's been very busy. Very, very, very busy. I don't know why Yahoo's running so slowly today. I'm just trying to pull up a game log, and it's not working very well. But you have all there's all these games that keep surfacing where he doesn't do as much, and I can't really figure out why. Is this a guy that they want to get going? I mean, this is another dude. Like, Keon Johnson's not a rookie. He's been in the NBA for 3.5 years. Is this a guy the Nets are going to say is the future? So, again, I think the answer here is probably just call him an injury ad and deal with the Cam Thomas thing when he comes back. But you can play Keon Johnson for now. Stream away, ladies and gentlemen. Stream away. Bilal Coulibaly is the next name on the list, and to me, he's a must-roster player. The post-Kuzma era started with a triple freaking double. If you wanted to know a guy who so badly needed a usage dude to get out of his damn face, Coulibaly is a great example of that. Wizards, not surprisingly, have played a lot better since he's started to warm back up again of late, but I don't need him to shoot a great percentage. I just need him to be involved all the time. And that's what happened in this last one, because when he's involved all the time, he does a little bit of everything. 11 points, 10 boards, 11 assists, 2 steals, a block. Yeah, the 6 turnovers are a little bit of a messy mess. And, last 2 games being against Charlotte and Brooklyn made life easier. It's not always going to be so simple, but you're going to get into silly season, and then teams are going to kind of stop paying attention anyway. He's also a sell high. If you happen to be in a position to move a player in your league, these last 2 games are probably about as good as it's going to get. But again, he does a little bit of everything. The 42.5% shooting is a downer. But look at the other stuff. 12.5 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists, 1.3 steals, 0.8 blocks. He's over a 3-pointer a game. I mean, even if he warms up a little bit, that's enough to get it done. If he doesn't warm up, you just get a little more usage, a little more time with the ball in his hands. And to me, he's a guy that won out in a big way at the trade deadline. We talked about Jusuf Nurkic a bunch already while we were going through the Moussa Diabate thing. But here's the thing with Nurk, more specifically about Nurkic himself. His job in Phoenix is different than what his job will be in Charlotte. His job in Phoenix was to be basically like the fifth fiddle. A guy who sets a lot of screens and gets a bunch of rebounds, but isn't really involved offensively. At least on a per minute basis. This year in Phoenix, Nurkic did the least per minute basically of any point in his career until you go all the way back to the Denver days when he was splitting time with Nikola Jokic. He got traded to Portland in 2016. 2016-2017 season, which, by the way, I think was when I started fantasy podcasting. And, 29 minutes that year, he took 12 shots a game. 26.5 minutes the next year, he took 12 shots a game. 11.5 shots the year after that. Bubble Nurkic took 13.5 shots, but, I mean, obviously, small sample size. Then he was dealing with family stuff and motivational stuff and blah, blah, blah. And even then, he still got up to 9 shots a game. We were badly out of shape. And he still went for 11.5 and 9 with a steal and a block. This year, he took 6.5 shots per game in 24 minutes a night. It's the second lowest field goal attempt number of his entire career, all the way back to 2014, 2015 with Denver. Even the years after that, when he was only playing 17 or 18 minutes with the Nuggets, he was still taking more than 6.5 shots. Barely, but more. His field goal percent this year was the lowest since those years in Denver, because he stepped out and he was just jacking up 3-pointers. He just was not involved with what the Suns were doing, and eventually, clearly was on the outs with the team. You put him in Charlotte, and again, I don't know how many games he plays the rest of the way. Let's start to think of it from that standpoint. But pretty much any time he gets in there, I would expect him to play at least 23, 24 minutes and probably do more like, the out-of-shape Nurkic Portland year right after COVID when he was at 11 and a half and 9 with a steal and a block. I think that's a very repeatable number for him, and that's a playable number. Now, the issue, of course, being I don't know how many games he gets off rest, but as I said earlier in this podcast, the Hornets have every reason to try to rehabilitate Nurk's value so they can move him in the offseason or next year. They want to try to get something for him, and right now, nobody wants anything to do with Nurk. He was detested by his teammates in Phoenix. They didn't get along at all. He's looked bad, so he has to convince the league that he's worth something. And specifically, if you want to get out of basketball purgatory, like if you want to get out of a tanking situation, you really have to look like you can do stuff. So I would expect Nurk to play his butt off when he gets in there. The head-to-head side, it is complicated because I don't know about rest days. But for Roto, to me, he's definitely worth a shot because of the games cap. And head-to-head, I think you could grab him also. Like, they might just play him most games for the next month and a half. We really can't know. Is he going to sit back-to-backs? He's not unhealthy. I mean, I don't know. What do I know about Nurk's health? Will he sit back-to-backs for Charlotte? Maybe. We might find out in a couple of days. They've got a back-to-back the 9th and the 10th. And they've got a couple, they got one in a week after the All-Star break and so forth. But, I think he's worth rostering until we find out more. And the last name in the top 10 is Royce O'Neale, who got hot for 2 games in a row. Phoenix is such a mess, man. They lost the back-to-back to Portland. Mind you, Portland's playing well these days. Then they got blown out by Oklahoma City. But, that could happen to anybody. They've just been bad. And for O'Neale, I get it. He has 10 threes over his last 2 games, but his minutes are not guaranteed. The Suns have lots of options that they can play around with. And they're going to continue to play around with options. So you're going to have some good Royce games. You're going to have some bad Royce games. If you're going to go for anybody that just hits threes on the Suns, I would rather go Grayson Allen. But in actuality, I don't think I want anything to do with that team. We talk about all vibes teams these days. Lakers are an all vibes team. Blazers are an all vibes team right now. These teams that are just feeling good, winning, things are happening. The no vibes team right now is the Phoenix Suns. With every passing day, the Blazers feel more and more like they can make a run at a play-in spot. Portland's 9-1 in their last 10 ball games. They're 2.5 games out of a play-in now. And lucky for Portland, the Suns, the Kings, and the Warriors, they just keep stepping on their own wieners. Although the Warriors have Jimmy Butler coming, so that might make life a little bit better for them. Suns, they got no vibes. The Kings, I don't know what's going on there. They got hot with a new coach bounce, and then, wet fart. Thanks for watching, everybody. That's your top 10. And again, heavily trade deadline related names. I'm trying to think of other trade deadline names that I thought were interesting that didn't come up on this. And it would probably be Chicago, who I'm assuming isn't on this list because they're not playing today. That's correct. Chicago plays tomorrow. I would bet my ass that most of the Chicago guys are on the list tomorrow, but that's why they're not in there today. As far as Chicago goes, I think Ayo Dosunmu should be rostered everywhere and then some. Lonzo definitely in all Roto leagues, and Matas Bucelis is, I think, a little bit more speculative, but probably should be rostered as well. And let's see, Max Christie was another potential trade deadline winning name that we didn't cover, as was Brandon Pajemski. We'll talk about those guys coming up probably on another one of these top 10 ads. I just thought this was a fun time to do it because, again, I don't know, trade deadline. That's what I got. If you made it to this point in the show, that means you got to hit the subscribe button. Also, make sure you hit like and check out our friends at UnderdogFantasy.com. I've had a lot of fun playing with them so far. The ones I'm losing these days are the ones where I'm using the odds boost, because that makes me pick 3 names instead of 2, and I keep getting 2 out of the 3 right. But you know what? Let's do an underdog card together today. What do you think about that, guys? Seems fun, right? What's this? What's my big game win or bonus credit back? We'll do that coming up. That's for the Super Bowl. Let's pivot into the NBA today. What do we got? Pretty big card. No, medium-sized card. San Antonio, Charlotte, Cleveland, Washington. No. Charlotte's interesting. Let's go to Charlotte. LaMelo, if he makes his return. No, I'm a little worried. I mean, maybe there's an underplay there if we think he's on any kind of minutes cap. Nick Smith Jr. Oh, they don't have Diabate. That's sad. Chris Paul. He's got something that's off the board right now. Man, that's a shame. I was hoping for Diabate. I'm slightly disappointed. Hey, by the way, when you sign up for Underdog and you're playing along with us, make sure you use promo code OLDMAN, OLDMAN, or click on the link in the show description. That'll unlock $1,000, up to $1,000 in deposit match cash bonus and a free play that I don't have access to because I already used mine. But that makes it so when you pick your 2 names, one of them can be the freebie. So you really only need one thing to hit, a higher or lower on your pick'em card, and then you get your win. Let's see. Maybe Miami. You know what? Miami feels like a team of good vibes right now. How am I going to capitalize on the Miami good vibes? Butler's gone. We don't know if Wiggins is going to make his debut. Man, I want to get down on someone on that Miami side. Who am I going to go with? Do I go with one of the star-level guys like a Tyler Hero or an Adebayo, or do I go Collier Ware? He's been so much fun lately. I go Collier Ware against Brooklyn. Yeah, I think I'm going to go Collier Ware higher on point, rebound, assist. It's 21.5. And then we just talked about Keon Johnson earlier in the show. He's been playing so well lately. Let's get Keon to keep it going here. Higher than 20.5. That's probably going to blow up in my face. So we're going to go low on this one. Just a $2 play. Higher for Collier Ware. Higher for Keon Johnson. I didn't spend that much time on it, as you guys saw, because I wanted to get the podcast wrapped up. But that's what we can do together over at Underdog. Play with me. Use promo code OLDMAN or click on that link in the show description and unlock your free play. Wouldn't it have been nice for me to not have to pick the Keon Johnson one? Just do Collier Ware higher and a freebie? Yeah, I used that already. Shout out to BetOnline. Shout out to Underdog. Shout out to all of you, because you guys are great to help us keep growing here. We added over 100 subscribers to our YouTube page yesterday alone because of that trade deadline. I am eternally grateful. Let's keep growing. I'm Dan Besbris. That's another thing. Find me over on social media at DanBesbris. Critical Time. We do a lot of stuff over there. And I'll also point out the Discord link is in the show description. I'm going to be moving a lot of my late night stuff over into Discord. So join us over there so you get the recaps, all that kind of stuff. It's just easier and faster. And Twitter starts to quiet down a little bit this time of year. So I'll see you guys in Discord. I'll see you guys on Twitter. And we'll see you for our next show. Whenever the hell we do that. Probably a couple of hours, because normalcy. Later for now.